But John Leland is one of the first people to say religious freedom is more than toleration. I
Mhm.
love that.
That's great. You're listening to Good Faith Weekly. I'm Mitch Randall.
And I'm Missy Randall.
We're here each week exploring the intersection of faith and culture
We find people who stand up, speak out, and step forward.
for inclusion, freedom, and justice for all.
It's time for Good Faith Weekly.
Brought to you by Good Faith Media. Welcome to Good Faith Weekly. On this episode, Missy and I are going to catch up. We're also going to talk about another interview we conducted this week with Pastor Travis Norvell and his wife, Lori, who live in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And then later on the pod, we sat down with Randall Balmer, who's got a new book out titled America's Best Idea, The Separation of Church and State. It is a really good pod this week, so stay tuned. Hello there, Missy.
Hey, how are you?
I'm well, and you?
I don't know. I mean, not well.
That
yeah,
seems to be a weekly occurrence.
I know, but it's heavy.
It is a difficult week.
It's real heavy.
Yeah.
It's real hard. I just, as everyone knows, when things are stressful and big stressful, sometimes your body kind of protects itself, and then
Mhm.
something stupid happens, and then the floodgates open, and that's
Right.
kind of where I am.
Yeah.
Just with everything going on, and a couple of like really stupid things happened that aren't even worth mentioning before we recorded today, and now I'm just having a hard time keeping it together. So, forgive me. But related.
Yeah.
We did something this week that we haven't done before.
Right.
Our listeners, lucky you, will get two chances to listen or watch us this week
Yeah.
as we are releasing or have released, along with this episode, which is our typical weekly episode. We have a special episode that we released on our YouTube channel. Don't ask me how to get to that. I don't know.
Just go to YouTube and type in Good Faith Media and it will pop up.
Okay, that's what you do.
Yeah.
We were able to talk with our good friends Travis and Lori Norvell out of Minneapolis, Minnesota,
Yeah.
about their experience and what they're going through.
Right. If we actually recorded the pod last week before the news broke of Renee Good's murder
Mhm.
there in Minneapolis. And so, we've been talking about it all weekend and then obviously this week. Travis and Lori are residents there in Minneapolis. We've been following them on social media, been getting a lot of good information from them because they're out in the street, they're out in the community. Travis is the pastor at Judson Memorial Baptist Church there in Minneapolis, and Lori is a school board member
Mhm.
there in Minneapolis. And they've done a great job getting information out, not only to their communities, but for the rest of us who are watching from across the country. Really appreciate all that they're doing. But it was a stark reminder as we were trying to schedule this interview with them this week when I reached out to Travis and we were trying to find a time. We had to schedule it around his neighborhood patrol, not because of criminal activity that you would normally characterize as criminal, but because the federal government was going door to door.
Right. He said, I can't do this right now. ICE is in my neighborhood.
Right. It was
And
chilling.
yeah, it's just real tough. And I have to say, as an aside, this is Travis and Lori are out there. They're doing the work every day, whether
Yeah.
ICE is there or not. I have said many times over that there are 2, maybe 3 churches across the U.S. that we have, visited in our travels that I wish we lived closer to, and his is absolutely one of them. And so
100%.
our thoughts and prayers are with them, with their church, with their community. But yeah, definitely go, after you listen to this episode, go check us out on YouTube. It's our kind of our first video release podcast. So
Yeah.
hopefully you'll get some good information out of that and really hear from people who are on the ground.
Absolutely.
But what I was going to come to talk to you about today in the opening.
Oh, I feel like I'm in trouble.
No, it's just a little something.
Hang on, the Rolodex is flipping through. What did I do? What did I do? What did I do?
Nothing. I wanted to talk about microdosing.
Oh, wow. Did you hear that screech
That
of
was
the
a
tires?
hard pivot.
Wow, that's
hard
a
pivot.
hard turn.
I
Go
know,
ahead.
and right now you're really wondering where
I'm
I'm
really
going with
nervous
this.
right now.
So I feel like microdosing is such just a fad right now, right?
The term or the actual?
Yes.
What are we microdosing?
Yes. Yes. All of the above.
Yeah.
Everybody's microdosing this or that. You can
Right.
fill in the blank with whatever it is.
Mhm.
However, and again, related to what we were just talking about things being heavy, I have a friend I've met once in real life and then became friends on social media and
Yeah.
have just loved following her and her advocacy work. She's a physician and is just really active in fighting for people's rights, especially within medical care, but not just within medical care, within all avenues. And, she feels this heaviness very deeply too.
Sure.
And she posted something the other day that I think I'm going to adopt as my mantra for 2026.
Okay, let's hear it.
After all of her advocacy work and everything she's been doing, she posted some pictures from the weekend and she said, amidst everything that's going on and all the heaviness in the world, I'm microdosing joy.
Oh.
And I thought that is brilliant.
Oh, I love that.
Because that, I think, is the only way that we can, one, excuse ourselves and allow ourselves that time to do that, but also make a point to do that.
Yeah.
And it's just changed kind of my way of thinking this week. When you feel bad, putting everything aside and experiencing joy because of what's going on in, our country and around the world. But yet I think it's vital to find those moments, just like it's vital to find those moments of rest. It's vital to find those moments of joy. So I will be, for the rest of the year, microdosing joy.
I love that you bring that up because, now that you say that, we announced last week that we were launching Bad Faith Media. Tough week to launch a satirical news site. But it's been a great response from the audience. I mean, we've gotten numerous emails and social media posts about the need for laughter, the need for satire, the need for comedy. And to me, as I was listening to you talk, is that it's so heavy right now. It's so dark. It's so distressing that any hope or any glimmer of laughter or joy or light we grasp onto. And so I love the idea of microdosing joy.
I
I'm
really
gonna do that.
do. And
I'm going to remind you of that when I don't I don't do my chores around
and I
here.
feel like there's just we all know that the English language is so limiting. And so I don't know what other words to say other than those that you've mentioned: heavy, terrifying, unprecedented. What are the other words to use? And that's the problem I'm having right now in describing where we're at, because I feel like it just doesn't do our moment justice. But, I've said many times to you, I've said before on this podcast, laughter is my love language. And so, like you mentioned, Bad Faith Media, which we've said, because laughter is belief without the vocabulary. And I think right now that we are missing vocabulary. And so to find joy and to find laughter is what is going to help carry us through.
100%. I agree.
And so, one of the things we're excited about we get to do this weekend to microdose a little joy is we're going to get to spend some time with a group of friends that we're really excited about. We're about to embark on a really busy season. And so just taking a couple of days to, enjoy just hanging out with some friends will be nice. But the other thing that happened this week that probably has brought me more joy than it should.
I did the dishes.
Yes.
I did the laundry.
Yes. Those are all true. But I went into Home Goods the other day to make a return.
Oh, no. I know.
Yes. So I went in to return something. And on my way out, I saw something that just...
Yes, you did.
brought me joy. And I stood there for way longer than I should have to decide what I should do. And those words rang through my mind of microdosing joy. And I thought, this is a microdose of joy right now. But I bought my first ever garden gnome.
Yes, you did.
And he is precious. And he has a lantern and he lights up. I mean, which is so fun because you've been putting lights all around our flower beds. And so I brought him home and he makes me happy. He brings me a little bit of joy when I
Have you named the gnome?
No, I haven't. I'll have to think on that.
Okay.
But he has a green hat and a green shirt. He will carry us through St. Patty's Day. It'll be great. So I realized that ages me. And, I thought, am I really old enough to be buying a garden gnome? And just decided, yes.
Yeah, when you walked through the door this week with that gnome in hand, you had this shall we say, sort of grin on your face.
Yes.
You were very proud of yourself.
I am. So he's very cute, but he brings me joy. So those are just a couple of things that have brought me some joy. But so one of the things we did last weekend, we went to a protest in Oklahoma City for in the wake of Renee Good's murder and also, ICE activity. And we were so just blown away by the presence there and by people there. And we kind of think, why do we do this? Why are we standing out here? ICE isn't infiltrating our city or our state necessarily. I know they're here, but not in the same way. But we interviewed kind of a local celeb here in town who does a lot of outreach and stuff like that, and asked him, why do we come here? And he said, honestly, I think people need this community.
Yeah.
You need to be here. And I think he so perfectly encapsulated that. And in that moment, that was, again, a little microdose of joy, just to feel the presence of others who are passionate about this work and who are passionate about people.
Yeah. You're talking about Sean Cummings, who's got a big social media presence here in Oklahoma. And so, we spoke to him. His interview will be up on our YouTube channel pretty soon. But I will never forget the young 20-year-old woman that I interviewed at the protest. And when I asked her why she was at the protest, she said, I'm exhausted. 20 years old. I'm exhausted. I'm tired of this. She's only lived a blip of her life, and she's exhausted by the chaos of what this world has brought. And she's out there wanting a better tomorrow. And I'll just never forget that. It was really amazing. And her interview will be on our YouTube channel as well. But it's that glimmer of community, that glimmer of hope that we cling to in these times that are very distressful. And I keep using the word heavy. And to me, that's what it feels like. I think I've told this story before. The hottest and most miserable I have ever been in my entire life was when I was 18 years old and I went down to Starkville, Mississippi in August to a baseball camp. And you walked outside and you had to cut through the air. It was so heavy. That's what it feels like. It feels like
oppressive.
The humidity and heat is just that oppressive. And that's what it feels like every day. So I love the idea of clinging to joy, just microdosing joy.
Yes. So I will add that to my microdosing repertoire.
Well, now we're going to get messages. What's on
what are we microdosing?
What's the other?
No.
Oh, that's hysterical.
Maybe a few other things that need to come into that little cocktail. But no, I think that's such a great framing, and I really appreciate her words and helping me through that and helping me to remember that.
Well, speaking of microdosing, Missy, we had one of our favorite
I'm real interested to
guests
see how you're transitioning
on our
this.
pod this week, and he's got a little microdose of separation of church and state for us. See what I did there?
I see what you did there.
Randall Balmer is professor at Dartmouth College, good friend of ours. He's got a new book out titled America's Best Idea, The Separation of Church and State. And it's a little bitty book that you can put in your back pocket, but it is rich and filled with great information.
Yeah, it really is. And it's so applicable and so pertinent to what we're going through today, to look back at the foundation of the separation of church and state, religious liberty, and how it truly was the greatest gift to our nation. We're clinging to it by a thread at this point. And so I loved reading the book. I loved getting that reminder of what this means and what the foundation is for our country. And I also adore Dr. Balmer for continuing to put out some of these just easily digestible, consumable books. Doesn't take 20 hours to listen to it. It really doesn't. And so I love that he's got some others out like this. And I really appreciate him and his scholarship and his taking the time to write these. He talks about at the end, his form of resistance is the pen. And I'm so thankful for it.
Yeah. And it was providential to have him on the pod this week because here in the state of Oklahoma, there were two incidents locally that really reminded me of the importance of separation of church and state and true religious liberty. And that was the story that broke out of Broken Arrow, Oklahoma, where I grew up. And the city council voted to deny the Greater Islamic Society of Tulsa permit to build a new mosque there. And it was it was egregious. It was blatant religious discrimination. And you had local leaders, politicians who are running for governor, saying what
Mhm.
a great and bold decision it was to deny this permit. It was just absolutely heartbreaking. And so, I was just reminded, that minorities in this country, religious minorities, are still having to battle uh,
Mhm.
for their rights. And that is why the principle of separation church and state is so important
Mhm.
for issues like that. And then you sent me on an errand today. And as I was driving through downtown Norman, I came across our county courthouse that
Yes.
now has a blazoned on the
Yes.
top of the courthouse, "In God We Trust."
Yes, that happened just this week. It was with much fanfare that was slapped upon our county courthouse for all to know, and who will surely come to know the Lord
Of course.
now that the courthouse has
Have you
"In
not
God We
heard?
Trust"
Revival is breaking out here in Norman, Oklahoma
on,
because
yes,
of
on the
that.
courthouse steps, 100%.
That's right.
Guys, you just can't make this make
You
sense.
cannot. You cannot. So, yes, we got to speak with Dr. Balmer. He is terrific. And Missy and I will be right back after this break with Dr. Randall Balmer to talk about his new book, America's Best Idea: The Separation of Church and State. Hi, I'm Mitch Randall, CEO of Good Faith Media. We're a nonprofit dedicated to inclusion for all, freedom for all, and justice for all. And we invite you to support us in this work by becoming a Good Faith Advocate. Everyone who donates $50 or more per year becomes a Good Faith Advocate. You'll get our free quarterly magazine, discounts at our bookstore, access to other exclusive content, and more. You'll also be supporting media content and journalism that makes a difference. Consider becoming a Good Faith Advocate today at goodfaithmedia.org. Welcome back to Good Faith Weekly. On this episode, we've got a very special guest with us. Prize-winning historian and Emmy Award nominee Randall Balmer holds the John Phillips Chair in Religion at Dartmouth College. This is Dr. Balmer's third time on Good Faith Weekly. Dr. Balmer has been published widely in both scholarly journals and in popular press. He is regularly asked to comment on religion and American life, and he has appeared frequently on network television, NPR, and on both the Colbert Report and The Daily Show with Jon Stewart. Dr. Balmer has published more than a dozen books, and his latest book, America's Best Idea: The Separation of Church and State, is in bookstores now. Dr. Balmer, welcome back to Good Faith Weekly.
Always a pleasure. Thank you so much.
So, Dr. Balmer, before we talk about the book, I feel like we have to sort of address a few of the things that have been happening in our country the last few weeks. So, from the U.S. capture of Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro to ICE and the murder of Robin Good in Minneapolis to the U.S. Justice Department launching an unwarranted investigation into the Federal Reserve Chair, 2026 has been, I think it has lost its meaning, but a bit of a dumpster fire. So, as a historian, what is standing out to you in this moment, and what do you make of what we're witnessing?
It's so difficult to formulate a response. I mean, the things you mentioned happen over a single weekend.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
This is just a cumulative case of. I feel as though we're standing in an avalanche of some sort, and uh, it's so hard to get your bearings because you're just buried in all this crap. I
Mhm.
probably shouldn't use that word, but
That
That's
summarizes it.
that's putting it nicely.
it's better than others that
Mhm.
occurred. It's I think what I found most frightening, frankly, is that little clip from the New York Times interview of
Yeah.
Donald Trump, and he was asked what restrains you, and he replied, uh, "My own morality and my own mind,"
Mm.
which
Neither
means
of which he has. So,
exactly nothing. It means, I mean, I mean, he
Mhm.
said it clearly. Nothing is restraining him because we both know, we all know that he has no morality. Uh, it is so frightening to me. And what I worry about, it's kind of the drip, 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 or the old analogy, which apparently is not entirely true, that a frog in boiling water, just it doesn't jump out because it
Mhm.
gradually gets hotter. I guess that's not entirely true, but according to a novel I'm reading right now. Uh, it's it's very frightening to me, and I think we have to stand up and as Mitch did so well, I think, with his recent piece, and say, where's the line? That's probably going to be my piece for Good Faith Media this month. That is, where's the line? I mean, how much do we have to take before we finally say enough is enough? But what's really worrying to me as a historian and something of an observer of politics is that there are no guardrails. Um, I did a column recently where I talked about the renaming of the Kennedy Center, the Trump Center, and the renaming, ironically enough, the U.S. Institute of Peace, the Donald J. Trump Institute of Peace, which is just
irony is dead, is all I have to say.
Exactly, right. And I said, what's next is, they're going to put the Donald J. Trump Supreme Court, because it's now toothless and afraid to stand up to him in any meaningful way. And that's what really worries me. And we have to get through the midterm elections this year. And I hope at that point there'll be some guardrails. But even until then, that's a long time. It's another year.
Randall, one of the things that we've been talking about frequently, in fact, I've been beating this drum for almost a decade now, when President Trump was elected the first time. But the correlation between the rise of Nazism in a democratic Germany, or the Weimar Republic that was leading at that time. Now, I know your concentration is primarily on religion here in the United States, but there certainly seems to be a direct parallel with what happened in the 1930s in Germany and what's happening now in the United States of America. A lot of people roll their eyes when I've said that over the last 10 years. But as someone who has studied history, is that far-fetched? Or because my concern is that, as was Germany, they woke up to the fact that they were taken over.
Sure.
And is that happening here in America now?
And they were complicit.
Right.
Ultimately, they're complicit. No, absolutely. And actually, there's a nice piece in the New York Times today by Michelle Goldberg where she talks about how at one time, the so-called liberals, and I'm happy to put myself in that camp, were regarded as being, fanatical and over the edge by talking about fascism. But now people are reconsidering that and saying, yes, we're there.
Yeah. And looking at what has transpired, I mean, you and I and others have been in this. We're going to get to the book, and this actually is a great lead into the book about church-state separation. But there have been those of us who've been battling this for decades now, this rise of religious fundamentalism in the United States. And it's always been present, but it was really politicized when Weyrich made his famous declaration, and the Southern Baptist Convention was taken over. So how much of what we are seeing right now, and in particular what we saw last week, how much can be laid at the feet of religious fundamentalism and how they got us here at this point?
Yeah, it's a really an unholy marriage that really began, I think, in the late 1970s with the rise of the religious right. And as you know from our previous conversations, I think I've established pretty conclusively that it had nothing to do with abortion in the 1970s.
Right,
it wasn't.
Right.
Instead, a defense of racial segregation, and that's. I'm waiting for somebody to contradict me on that with any evidence.
Right.
No one has yet. So I'll stick
All
with
you
that.
have to do is look at Wally Amos himself from First Baptist Dallas and his sermon that was, pro-choice, and then he flipped almost immediately.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, I'll give you another one here if you want to lead into the book. In 1960, I think I mentioned it in this book, America's Best Idea. 1960, he said something to the effect, that I believe in the separation of church and state, as any good Baptist would. And then in 1984, he said, I think the separation of church and state is the conjuring of some infidel or something like that.
Yeah. Oh, just 180. Yeah.
Talk about a reversal, an utter reversal. So yes, so is religious fundamentalism responsible for for this? I suppose so. I think it is. I think, and I think the people in the South, I think, see this more clearly than people in the North. I grew up as a Northern evangelical, and using the term evangelical, I know some Baptists don't like that term, but and so we were more apolitical, whereas I think the fundamentalists in the South, certainly by the 1970s, were hyper political, and so we're moving the politics and moving the nation in that direction. And again, I think it's hard to dispute that a defense of racial segregation was part of that agenda.
Well, just the strong emphasis on kind of autocratic leadership, even within the church, that the pastor was the leader, the denominational leaders were speaking truth. Whatever they said was almost equivalent to the gospel. We're
Yeah.
seeing that play out today, in the political sphere. I mean, God forbid someone question President Trump, because then he just goes on the attack, and you're not supposed to question the dear leader.
Yeah, that's right. I that's a good point, Mitch. And by the way, I used that term "dear leader" in my recent column quite a bit, talking about what else we could rename for "dear leader."
Right.
And I suggested, well, first of all, the Orange Bowl should be the Trump Bowl, but also
Well played. Well
I
played.
like it.
wastewater treatment plants in local municipalities, I think, should be named the Donald J. Trump wastewater
Right.
treatment
Exactly.
Excellent.
for dear leader. but I mean, to get semi-serious about this, I'm clear that nothing will satisfy his ego. There's one of the members of Congress from California suggested renaming the entire planet for Trump, and hey, let's not mess around.
Oh my
I haven't
gosh.
heard that one. Wow. I need a minute.
Yeah.
Well, Dr. Balmer, as we talked about, these events are really the very reason that separation of church and state are so important. Let's talk about the book. You've titled it America's Best Idea. That's a really bold claim. So tell us why you think that it is the best
Well,
idea.
I use that term with apologies to Ken Burns, who I admire. He says national parks are America's best idea, and I think he's being a little bit too modest there. I think America's best idea is the separation of church and state, and I say that because I think it's worked well from two angles. That is to say, and actually early in my career, I wrote an essay saying that the First Amendment, the separation of church and state, was agreeable to two very different individuals. Thomas Jefferson, on the one hand, who was an Enlightenment rationalist, and we all know about Thomas Jefferson, but also, and another person you know well, is Roger Williams, the founder of the Baptist tradition in America. And it's clear to me that Jefferson's interest in separation of church and state, that is, doing away with the religious establishment, was because he, along with other founders, were well aware of the religious contestation back in Europe, the wars of religion, the English Revolution, and they wanted to avoid that. They wanted to avoid all that mess effectively, and strike out on a radically new idea of having two separate entities, that is, religion and politics, church and state. So, and I think the First Amendment has satisfied Jefferson and the other founders in that it has produced remarkable political stability in this country that is untrammeled by religious factionalism. And let's go back to Roger Williams, who's really the person who coined the term, the idea of a wall of separation. It's very clear to me that Williams was concerned principally about protecting the integrity of the faith from being contaminated by association with the state. And I keep coming back to his metaphor. He wanted to separate the garden of the church from the wilderness of the world by means of a wall of separation. And I've said this before in a previous interview, and I apologize for repeating myself, but those of us in the 21st century, I think, don't really understand the power of that metaphor, because Roger Williams and his contemporaries were not members of the Sierra Club. That is, they didn't share our romantic notions about wilderness. So for them, wilderness was a place of darkness where evil lurked. And so when Roger Williams talks about protecting the garden of the church from the wilderness of the world, his principal concern was maintaining the integrity of the faith. And so what I argued in that early essay, early in my career, was that the First Amendment status has satisfied both remarkably well. It has ensured political stability, but it has also provided for a vibrant, salubrious religious culture in the United States, which is really unmatched anywhere in the world. And so in a sense, this little book that I just published, which you're talking about here, is an expansion on that idea, that expansion on this notion that the First Amendment has been good for politics and political stability. It's also been very good for religion. And why anybody would want to tear down this wall of separation, which has worked so well for over 2 centuries, is to me unfathomable.
Yeah.
But here we are.
Well, I have to say the metaphor does mean something to me because I have zero romanticized ideas about wilderness. So
Well,
I get it.
As Dr. Balmer was talking, it reminded me, I mean, William's metaphor is one of experience, because when he gets banished from
Really?
Massachusetts Bay Colony, where does he get kicked out to? The wilderness in the middle of winter in New England.
Right.
So he's left
And
for dead out there.
he has to walk from Boston to what is now Providence. I mean,
Yeah.
you poor guy in the middle of winter.
Exactly.
There's a great quote. I think I have in the book. There's something like, it was not a hospitable hike or something like that.
Yes, I laughed when I saw it. But it's such an amazing thing to look back at history. And I know when Mitch used to take, when he was in the local pastorate, and he would take classes through religious liberty and the separation of church and state, he would follow that metaphor along, kind of like you did, and talk about the different ways in which it was stated, and in the different ways that would bring imagery to mind based on where we were throughout history. And it's a really important point to make. And I thought when you made that in the book specifically about Roger Williams literally being in the wilderness, it became even more powerful.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Yeah, and the book also looks at the various threats along the way throughout American history, threats to the separation of church and state. So it's an idea that, again, I want to emphasize was an entirely new approach. No one had tried this radically new notion that you would construct a government without the interlocking buttress of religion. And again, it's worked so well. I don't know why people are trying to destroy it, but they certainly are. They certainly are.
When it befits them for now in the moment, when it's tied to power and wealth, what happens?
That's right. That's right. And that's one of the reasons we're in tough shape these days, I think.
Absolutely. So, Randall, one of the things that I'd like for you to address is that obviously there has been an attempt to redefine religious liberty in this country by the religious right, by religious fundamentalists, which has led to a lot of misconceptions about religious liberty and church-state separation. In the book, you mention one directly related to the Johnson Amendment. So could you address some of those misconceptions of church-state separation in regards to religious liberty?
Sure, yeah. And the Johnson Amendment is fascinating. Let me just go into a little background here. Lyndon Johnson was elected to the Senate in 1948, maybe. He won the Democratic nomination, which at that time was tantamount to election, by what was it, 83 votes or something like that, 87 votes, which probably were stolen. There's good historical evidence for that. Nevertheless, he goes into the Senate, and he stands for re-election in 1954. And there are some conservative voices, very conservative people in Texas, who think that he's too liberal and so forth for various reasons, which we can get into. And so he introduces into Congress what has become known as the Johnson Amendment, that prohibits tax-exempt organizations from making political endorsements. And the Johnson Amendment has been on the books ever since 1954. Dwight Eisenhower signed it into law. I mean, it was not a partisan issue. It was something that was really considered, fairly well established by everybody for decades. And all of a sudden, late in the 1970s, when the religious right gets going, some of these preachers you noted, are tend toward autocratic
Right.
means, start saying, "Hey, wait a minute! I want to be able to make an endorsement from the pulpit and by other means." And so all of a sudden, the Johnson Amendment is under attack. Well, let's think this through for a moment. What we have to understand, and I think people don't really appreciate, but you know very well, is that tax exemption is a form of public subsidy. And I think I've made that point in a previous interview in talking about the origins of the religious right. Tax exemption is a form of public subsidy. You know,
Right.
you, Mitch, you were a pastor. You
Sure.
understand that.
Yeah.
Your churches didn't pay property taxes, didn't pay
Right.
income taxes. Nevertheless, your church benefited from fire protection, police protection, local parks, or whatever it might be.
Right.
And it means that other people, other citizens in your town had to pony up a little bit extra in order to provide those services. Now, I mean, let's set aside, the merits of that. I think there's a good case to be made for that sort of tax exemption, but nevertheless, that's there. And all the Johnson Amendment asked in return for that taxpayer subsidy was that these organizations refrain from making political endorsements. Well, again, like I said, for decades, people understood that was a pretty good deal, right? I don't pay taxes. All I have to do is not make a political endorsement. All of a sudden, now this is up for grabs, and Donald Trump seized on this in the 2016 campaign, promising to do away with the Johnson Amendment as an infringement on free speech or something like that. Well, that's utter nonsense, of course. If a pastor wants to make a political endorsement, fine. All he has to do is give up his exemption. No problem.
Yeah, no.
But let's game this out. What would happen if we went ahead and abolished the Johnson Amendment? And my example would be, let's say that I had an extra $2-3 million sitting around, which I assure you I don't. And I went to, let's say Joel Osteen or Robert Jeffress, and said, "Hey, I've got $3 million. I'm willing to give to First Baptist Church in Dallas, or whatever Osteen's church is called in Houston, and all I ask in return is that you make some nice comments about Josh Shapiro or J.D. Vance every week from the pulpit for the next year." Now, for me as a donor, that's a pretty good deal. I get a $3 million tax deduction for making a charitable contribution.
Right.
But it is also a form of money laundering, seems to me, because it's buying political influence through a tax-exempt organization. And it leaves the churches up being for sale to the highest bidder.
Yeah.
Because somebody else can come along and say, "Well, I got $5 million if you endorse, I don't know, Buttigieg."
Yeah.
But
I want to see Robert Jeffers endorse Pete Buttigieg.
No,
but you're absolutely right.
I'd pay to see that.
Exactly.
Yeah. Same.
But you're exactly right. I mean, there's just so much misconception around, especially the free speech thing. It just drives me crazy, because any pastor can endorse a candidate from the pulpit if they choose fit. But there is a consequence to that, and that is losing your tax exempt status. So, yeah, that was one of the biggest misnomers that I really wanted you to address. So, thank you.
So, Dr. Balmer, throughout the book, you note the significant role that Baptist and, side note, cheese played in the development and implementation of religious liberty and church-state separation. So, just real quickly, recap the contributions, and secondly, help us kind of walk us through a little bit of what happened. But talk to us about, because again, Mitch and I grew up in the Baptist tradition, and were taught, all of our childhood, that we were such champions of church-state separation and religious liberty. And then you turn around and you just think, what happened?
Yeah.
I think the way I really wrote that question, Randall, was, what the hell happened to Baptist?
Well, but I don't talk like that.
No, exactly. No, I agree. I think, I wrote something somewhere saying America needs more Baptists. I mean, real Baptists, and there are not many left any longer. No, and you look through the roll call. We've talked about Roger Williams already, who's the founder of the Baptist tradition in America, also the progenitor of this notion You should have church and state as two separate entities. But you go through the list historically, and I'll miss a lot of people, but you have Isaac Backus in the colonial period, colonial Massachusetts and Connecticut. You've got John Leland, another champion. And by the way, I'm going off course here for a moment here, but John Leland is one of the first people to say religious freedom is more than toleration. I love that.
That's great.
I can say, well, I tolerate your right to be a Hindu or a Druid or whatever it is. Well, I mean, that's being condescending. And religious freedom is much more than merely toleration.
Right.
It's an embrace of someone else's right to be something else. But Isaac Backus, in the 20th century, George W. Truett, who of course was predecessor to A.W. Criswell. His famous address on the steps of the Capitol in 1920, I forget the date, but I mean, it's a resounding affirmation of Baptist principles, liberty of conscience, separation of church and state. I mean, it's a beautiful, beautiful address. And then you come to the late 1970s, and the Southern Baptist Convention really gives up its task as a monitor of the wall of separation between church and state, and begins actively to whittle away at that wall of separation between church and state.
I mean, you can almost see the physical moment when they turned their backs on President Carter, who was one of them, a Southern Baptist who believed wholeheartedly, and you have an incredible biography on President Carter, who wholeheartedly believed in church-state separation. And once they turned their back on him, they fully embraced trying to tear that wall down.
The great story behind this is after the vote in June of 1979, when the conservatives take over the Southern Baptist Convention. There's a delegation of Southern Baptist leaders who go to the White House and visit with Mr. Carter, and they have prayer with him and so forth. At the end of the conversation, one of the pastors, I believe it was earlier said, the initials JC, our candidate, I've forgotten his Bailey Smith.
Bailey Smith. Oh,
Bailey
God
Smith.
bless Bailey.
At the end of the conversation, he says to the president, he says, "Mr. President, some of us are praying that you will give up the religion of secular humanism." That night goes back to the residents in the White House, and he asks Rosalynn, "What's secular humanism?"
Exactly.
She had no idea either.
Exactly.
Did they Google it?
That was before Google.
Right.
So I thought, and you kind of made reference to this a moment ago, and historically Baptists, come to this place from knowing what it's like to be the minority and to be penalized or ostracized or persecuted, whatever. And so they come to this from that place of remembering that. Obviously, I'd say modern day Baptists have largely forgotten that. Gaining, that evangelical voice as, figuring out, okay, we're the majority now. And then you take us back to, where now they love to come from a voice of minority, even though they're not. So I thought that was really interesting. And I really loved the way you just kind of put together that narrative of just the mind twist that's been happening.
Yeah, that's right. And I think one of the great perils we're facing right now is majoritarianism. That is this notion that whoever is or can claim a majority in the society can dictate how everybody else lives. And that, again, that's, as you say, Missy, that's utterly inimical to Baptist principles historically. It's utterly contrary to the founders and our founding documents. I mean, the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, ensured the rights of minorities, and I'm the first to acknowledge that we have been far too slow to enact that or to live into those ideals. Certainly with women, people of color, Native Americans. I mean, that's a whole other conversation. But my sense of American history up until the last few years is that we have been steadily on that arc toward justice and toward recognizing the rights and prerogatives of minorities. And now for people to use the term because they don't know the term properly, but to be majoritarians in the society,
Right.
I think it's utter betrayal of the best of who we are as Americans.
But even though they're, like you said, they're in the majority, they're still trying to claim, oh,
Yeah.
we're so put upon, we're persecuted. We're not.
Persecuted,
They're coming. They're going to change our way of life. You know, they them. You know, who are coming for us. And it's like, have you looked at the numbers? I mean,
You're doing a good job of
you're
reducing those yourself.
yeah. But anyways,
Oh, absolutely, yeah. This whole rhetoric of victimization, I think, is a very effective political tool. And I'll go on to posit that I think one of the reasons, it's one of the reasons, but I think it's an important one, that you have 4 out of 5 white evangelicals voting for Donald Trump in the past 3 presidential elections.
Mhm.
One of the reasons is that he speaks the language of victimization, I think, better than anyone I've ever.
Yeah.
It's always about him. He's the victim, of course, but I think there's some visceral way in which white evangelicals have been socialized, I would say, to identify with this rhetoric of victimization, because they always want to say, as you said, Missy, we're the minority, we're under attack, our values are being targeted in this country, and as you say, I mean, there's no empirical evidence to support that, but it's nevertheless a very, very, very powerful tool of mobilization.
One of the things, as we bring this to a close, Randall, I want to ask you about is one of the things I love about reading your books is the historical narrative that is woven through these big ideas. Because a lot of times when we talk about church-state separation or religious liberty, we do talk about it on a national level. And sometimes the nuances of the reality that we face gets lost in that conversation. But when you write about the Danbury Baptist in Connecticut, writing to President Jefferson about their persecution, the real persecution that they're facing there in Danbury, to what happened here in Oklahoma this week, well, which continues to happen here in Oklahoma this week. Just in the last 24 hours, our county courthouse plastered "In God We Trust" on the side of the building, and then the Greater Islamic Society of Tulsa was denied a permit to build a mosque on land that they owned.
Oh, goodness.
We
Yeah.
have forgotten that these ideals that we hold true, they will come home to roost if we do not uphold them
Yeah.
in a
Yeah.
very local way. And
Yeah.
a lot of times I think we forget that. And so I'd like for you to speak about what can the average citizen do to make certain that the wall of separation between church and state stays intact.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think each of us brings different tools to the task.
Right.
Some people are going to be standing on street corners with placards and inviting both approbation as well as condemnation from their neighbors in doing that. I think other people have different skill sets that they bring to this, but I think it's important for all of us to pitch in. I have stood on street corners and I probably will do so again, but my tool is the pen,
Right.
more than the megaphone, I suppose. But I think it is important to resist this, and part of the problem of in not resisting it is it becomes normalized. That is, this sort of behavior becomes normalized, and we think, oh, well, is it all that unusual to have a president say that he relies only on his own morality when he conducts foreign policy or anything else?
Right.
I mean, if we don't speak up, if we don't resist that on the national level, or even as you say on the local level, then it becomes normalized, and that I think is very dangerous.
Well, Dr. Randall Balmer, thank you once again for joining us on Good Faith Weekly for the third time, and I know there's going to be a fourth time upcoming.
I hope so.
But before we let you go, you know it's coming. We've got one last question that we've asked you before, and Missy's going to ask it again, so I'm going to let her take it away.
Well, before I ask the final question, I just want to express my deep gratitude for you continuing to put out these books that are easily digestible
Yeah.
and are not a 20-hour listen, because I think that's so important. It's so important to have something that is, yes, easily listened to and absorbed by those of us who are not in academia. So I appreciate yet another one. Thank you for doing that. So, all right, Dr. Balmer, as you know, our tagline at Good Faith Media is "There's more to tell." So in light of your work and our conversation today, what is your more to tell?
Yeah, I think I'm going to do a little variation on what and the way I answered last time. If I remember correctly, I said what's more is history and the importance of history, and I'm going to reiterate that. I think history is very important, and I'll go even further to say that truth is important, especially these days. I think, and Mitch just asked about how we resist, how we stand against these forces that seem so overwhelming sometimes, and I think they are. I feel discouraged, and I know a lot of other people do. But I think one weapon at our disposal is truth. And what I've tried to wield is the truth as revealed in history. So when David Barton or these other nutcases go around and saying that, 53 out of the 55 founders were evangelical Christians or some nonsense like that, I think it's important to have something maybe like this little book, America's Best
Exactly.
Idea, to say, well, wait a minute. Are you going to put Benjamin Franklin in that category or Thomas Jefferson? And also, I mean, beyond that, let's read the First Amendment itself. And in response to people who say that America is and always has been a Christian nation, the founders were very clear about that. The Treaty of Tripoli is very clear about that.
That's about as clear as you can get, is the Treaty of Tripoli.
Article 11 of the Treaty of Tripoli reads, "As the government of the United States is not in any sense founded on the Christian religion." Hello. That's pretty clear. So I think truth is important. I think history is important. And I'll go one further and say that I've come to regard hope as a mandate. And especially in these dark days. Some years ago, a colleague asked me to write an essay about hope. And in the course of writing it, it occurred to me that, first of all, of the three theological virtues, faith, hope, and love, we talk a lot about faith. We certainly talk about love, a lot about love. We don't talk much about hope. And the other thing that occurred to me is that of those three theological virtues, faith, hope, and love, hope is the only virtue that is volitional. That is to say, I can choose to be hopeful. I may not be able to choose faith, especially if I'm a Calvinist. I certainly can't choose love, but I can choose to be hopeful. And I've come to regard hope as a mandate, that God is calling us to be hopeful, especially in these dark days.
Wise words. Thank you so much for your wisdom and for your book. The book is America's Best Idea, The Separation of Church and State. And as I said a moment ago, Randall, you're welcome back anytime, my friend.
Thank you so much. Hey, keep up the good work, keep the faith, and we'll get through this.
Appreciate that. And to our audience, thank you so much for joining us this week. Missy and I will be back next week with another guest. And until then, keep living good faith. You've been listening to Good Faith Weekly, hosted by Mitch and Missy Randall. This weekly podcast from Good Faith Media discusses matters of faith and culture.
Subscribe wherever you get your podcast and give us a like and a glowing review. We produce the podcast out of Norman, Oklahoma. Our music comes from Pond 5.
And we're supported by listeners like you. Learn more about us at goodfaithmedia.org.